All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to All Systems Nominal Mercenaries, where we will be following the exploits of a mercenary squad and their adventures in giant robots. Very excited to have with me today some awesome players. Let's start with Darren, if you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little about why you're so cool.
Oh, wow. That's true. My name is Darren. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just around, I'm here, I'm there. Sometimes I run a game, sometimes I play a game. I don't know why I'm so cool. I'm so cool because I'm into mecha genres, specifically of the anime, the like distinctly anime persuasion. So I don't know, I'm just thrilled to be here. I thought I was gonna have a guest appearance in episode 2, but I'm here for all of them apparently. Oh, there's a knock on my door, so I'll be right back.
Perfect timing. David, would you introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, sure. My name's David. I really like mecha genre in anime. I like it in video games. I'm a fan back in the old days of the Mech Warrior PC games, and I played the little figurine-based combat game, tabletop game that they had back in the day too. So it's in Armored Core and all that stuff. It's in my veins, and I want to see it happen on tabletop role playing.
Very cool. As usual, I'm the opposite, like not steeped in the stuff at all, but very interested in it. Louise, how about yourself?
Hey, I'm Luis, and I like mecha. I mostly watched Gundam Wing when I was a kid. It was super gay, so that really drew me in, but I really like the robots as well. And I don't know, I like the aesthetic of having big robots fighting in space and being overly dramatic and stuff like that. I rewatched Code Geass recently, so I'm really into that headspace, and I'm excited to be here.
Very cool. My upbringing was in G Gundam, which is nothing like what we're going to be doing today, but thanks anyway.
Oh man, what was the American guy's name in that? Like Rickety Crockett or something super like aggressively American.
Yeah. I mostly remember Master Asia, like all of Asia. I'm the master of it.
Yeah, and the guy who wore an eye patch just to take it off. I don't know.
It was such a good show. And finally, Rich, tell us about yourself. Why are you?
Hey, I am Rich. I play games with the Gauntlet, and sometimes I run them. My vector is like through BattleTech, a lot of MechWarrior 2, and then I kind of fell off. I was disappointed not to find heat sinks in this. No, I'm joking. I'm not at all disappointed to not find heat sinks. Although I will honestly, like, when there was weapons, it just says design it, and it doesn't have a list of weapons. I'm like, fuck. So I went to BattleTech, and that's where I was like, oh, Gauss rifle. Then an AC-20, like Gauss rifle. So Gauss rifle. The end.
Cool. Let's dramatically launch some rocks at super high velocities. Good deal. So yeah, as far as the concept goes, we're not necessarily playing in any established mech universe. We're kind of just making our own. But I think that we're going to be looking at this lens through a pretty small scope. So we don't necessarily need to establish like the world at large and the sort of intergalactic situation necessarily. We're kind of looking at this squad, this mission and set of engagements, right? And then, the sort of feelings that they have along the way. So as far as anime goes, and as well as like American robot fighting media, right? I'm seeing this as being something sort of trying to thread the needle in between, right? Where we're both going to be having big explosive action and sort of gritty dark and grim, like examination of war and its effects, and people who are perpetrating violence and things like that. But also, we're going to be spending some downtime, right? We're going to be out of the mechs. We're going to be in the flesh, dealing with each other and dealing with the things that we've seen and done, right? So I don't want it to be, we mentioned this kind of in the chat ahead of time, but I'm hoping this won't be something that's super draining and dark and sad all the time, which is part of the reason why we're stressing this debrief procedure. But I also don't want us to necessarily trivialize war, right? I think that can be sort of a pitfall with this media sometimes, with this genre, is that war and the casualties of it sort of get glossed over in order to sort of like gratify our desire for big metal machines and explosions and things like that. So we're going to try to balance that, basically. We mentioned some Touchstone animes and shows that we watched. One of my inspirations was Gundam 08th MS Team, which is one of the more grounded Gundam miniseries. I mentioned Cowboy Bebop as a tonal touchstone, where there's sort of some down moments, but also some humorous and heartfelt moments as well. Maybe not as elevated of emotions as, say, Gundam Wing, right? Or Big O, but things like that we can keep in mind. But at the same time, I don't expect anyone to come to the table with previous knowledge of any anime or game in particular. If you're going to introduce a piece of technology with your robot, just tell us a little bit about it so that we can all be on the same page. And we'll do a little bit more of that in character creation. But I want to finish the procedure here by talking about safety and subject matter. So like I touched on, I don't want to trivialize or gloss over war. So there's a lot of subject matter that can come up with that can be pretty heavy, right? We're going to see violence, casualties. Some of the stuff is going to be on screen. Some of the stuff we can kind of have more off screen, right? But it's going to be present. So I want to have some safety tools on the table. One of those is going to be the X card. Basically, anytime we're in a situation where things are getting a bit too heavy for you in any respect, right, you can call the X card and we can change things up. This is a lot of ways we can accomplish this. We can throw up an X with our hands. We can type an X into the chat. We're also going to be using Roll for Your Party to roll dice, which also has built-in X card tools, right? It also has some script change tools as well that we can use if we want to fast forward through some maybe grim events that we know are going on, but we don't really want to zoom in and detail them. We can rewind if things are going in a direction that we're just not comfortable with. We can try going in a different direction. We can always pause, have a discussion about what's unfolding, see how we want to proceed. We also have an open door. If we need to pause to take a break, pause and just say, hey, I can't do this tonight. There's going to be no judgment, because the whole point that we're trying to establish here is that we respect each other as people and friends first and storytellers second, right? So the story is sort of secondary to what's going on with our mental well-being. I'm not trying to traumatize anybody here tonight, basically. So yeah, that's our safety tools we have available. And one more thing I want to touch on is the debrief procedure. It's not a mandatory debrief. It's totally optional. If you want to stay afterwards and talk and all that fun stuff, you can. If you just have some feedback regarding the system and you'd rather not stay and talk about feelings, that's fine too. You can send me a message, things like that. So definitely not obligated there. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about lines and veils. Let's put some of this stuff right out on the table so that we have appropriate expectations shared, right? With the context of this war fiction in mind, I'm okay if there's certain things that we want to compartmentalize and cut off and say, this isn't something I really want to see in play, even though I know that this is part of the fiction and the genre. So for example, I would like to put human trafficking behind a line. So human trafficking is often something that happens through the course of war, prisoners of war, people being taken, children, women being kidnapped, things like that. I would like to put that behind a line. So human trafficking is not going to be one of the elements of this combat and engagement that we're in. As an example, if you would like to contribute a line or a veil, we're going to be able to do this anonymously thanks to Roll for Your Party. So let me throw in a link here. I'll make sure that I get this on the character sheet so we don't lose track of it. This is the Roll for Your Party room. If everybody wants to hop in there, we're going to use the X card button to submit lines and veils that we have. Okay, so you'll see on the third row there, am I right? Is that right? Well, very bottom row, you'll see the black button that says X card. If you click that, it's going to put up a little box that will let you type in a description, and you can put either line or veil. So to remind you, a line is something that we don't want to see on screen at all. We don't want it to be an element of our story. Whereas a veil is something that we're comfortable being part of the story, but we don't really want to go into detail about it. We would rather kind of be off screen, so to speak, whether we're fading to black, seeing silhouettes, things like that. So if you have any of those in mind, go ahead and practice hitting that X card. Okay, so we have a veil on torture. That means that we don't want any graphic depictions of torture, but it's something that we acknowledge might come up in the story. So we're going to maybe close the door on that happening. We see someone coming out saying, I have the information, whatever that might be. Now, I will say, if anyone wants to, they can bump that veil up to a line, meaning that I don't want torture to be an element at all. But first, I want to get to this next line, which is sexual violence. So yeah, this is also something that can come up in war for sure. I'm just writing these down so I don't forget. But we're just going to not have sexual violence be one of the forms of violence that we see in this story. I can get behind that. Okay, we have another veil on violence towards children. Sounds good to me. Yeah, that's definitely a tricky one that I want to kind of be respectful towards, is, you know, kids and innocent people being victims of some of these casualties of war, and let's just make sure that we're not seeing that graphically, right? I'm imagining that the sort of thing we might see with a veil on violence towards children is like after the battle, there's like a teddy bear on the ground, that sort of thing, right? Now, if you're still not comfortable with that kind of thing coming up, let's go ahead and bump that up to a line. Let me know. But again, we can't necessarily fully anticipate what we're going to be able to handle when it comes time. So that's part of the reason why we have the X card available too. If something comes up and we're just like, I thought I was going to be able to handle that, but really I'm not, X card is your go-to. And there will be no judgment from me or any of our other players if that happens. Not seeing any more lines or veils pop up right now. We can add those in later if we see fit. But I will make sure that we have these. And just to reiterate, we have a line on sexual violence, a veil on torture, and violence to children. And I think I might have missed another veil here. Okay. A veil on medical or hospital scenes. Sure. So people who are in surgery or even in a hospital, we'd rather see them recovering back at the base. Is that right? And kind of dealing with that. You can always use the X card if you want to clarify further. But yeah, it sounds like we're just going to skip on that. So as far as setting goes, we're going to be having like a mobile operating center for your mercenary corps that's going to have like a medical wing or a medical bay as well. But it sounds like we're not interested in having detailed descriptions of these scenes happening in either local hospitals or medical places or in our mobile operating center. Sounds good. I will keep that in mind. I'll make a note to myself here. And I will try to get these onto the character sheet as well for future reference. But for now, I think that's good for me. Okay. Now, character creation, our favorite part. I know that Darren was feeling a little worried about what his concept might be, but that's okay. There's a lot to consider here. So what I would like to do, since I'm still getting familiar with this game, and I'm sure some of you are as well, it's kind of going through this process step by step, and we'll focus on one portion of the character creation with one person and character at a time, and everybody else can sort of follow along while we're doing that. And Rich, I think I'll start with you since you've got a little bit of a head start here in the character page. Mm-hmm. So I want to give us all a little bit of grounding here in the setting, right? Again, we don't have a lot established. We don't necessarily need to do that extensively, but I don't want everyone to be super confused. So here is like the basic pitch for the setting, the basic proposal. A long time ago, we'll say thousands of years ago, Earth succumbed to climate disaster. Bummer. But it wasn't the governments in this case that were able to muster an escape plan, but instead multinational corporations. Okay. As a result, it was those corporations that formed the fabric of the newly colonized galaxy, right? So instead of planets being under the jurisdiction of certain countries or unions of countries and things like that, it was under corporations. And of course, in the interim, these corporations have merged and split and formed entirely new identities, cultures, things like that. So none of them are going to be familiar to our modern day corporations. There's not going to be any Apple Mecha Corporation, but you might find inspiration from one of those. So we have two that have kind of already been described a little bit, which was in the mission briefing. We have the Marai Symposium and the Apex Conglomerate, but that's kind of like, think of those almost as countries, as you would in the typical military combat, right? When they're getting into wars now, though, it's not necessarily over ideals, but probably more about money. And of course, there's always the thing we're thinking about, well, aren't all wars about money? And maybe they are. But we might play with that idea a little bit. So the difference, though, being a mercenary, right, is that you're not necessarily loyal to one specific corporation, right? You work between multiples. And a soldier in the military would be someone who's loyal to the corporation that they were probably born and raised and steeped in their culture, if that makes sense. So, Rich, we have here Lieutenant Ishikawa, who has a martial background. So in that case, that means that you have a background, you have experiences with a specific corporation's military. Mm-hmm. Does that sound right to you?
Yes, I actually was thinking, and I wanted to check in before I went too far down that path, that he is effectively an indentured servant to the corporation. Like he was raised by that corporation.
Yeah, we could definitely delve into that a bit. So maybe that could be even part of how life in the colonies works now, is that you sort of have a contract with whatever corporation you're raised by. Does that sound like what you were thinking?
Yeah.
So I have to ask, now that you're a mercenary, you know, I would say mercenary profession is like an extra military profession, right? It's sort of like operates outside of the normal military bounds. And so the question's got to be, what made you leave the military and join a mercenary corporation?
I think that it wasn't just him who was indentured. It's his entire like extended family, kind of like a vassalage type deal. And he's effectively served enough terms, because you can see the picture, he looks a little bit older. He served enough terms to where he can muster out. He's effectively kind of earned his freedom. I'm thinking along the lines of like Starship Troopers, how there were citizens and civilians. He's become a citizen and has chosen the mercenary life because that's really all he's good at. And he's trying to raise enough money to continue to like buy the freedom of his family.
Very cool. So if you do manage to fulfill or pay off your debt to a corporation, what happens to you then?
Good question. And again, if anybody has other ideas, like jump in. I'm just speaking extemporaneously. I hadn't actually thought that far. I think that you could, if you've kind of bought yourself out of your vassalage or your indentured servitude, and that contract's up, then you can become an independent contractor, or you can, if you have enough wherewithal, or if you saved some credits, then you can live in a colony. You know, you can do your own thing, make your own choices. You don't have the warm embrace of the corporation, mother corporation, but you know, you do have that freedom.
Interesting. And if you abscond from your duties before paying off your debt, that may not bode well for you. Does that sound about right?
Oh yeah, there's definitely chase teams and squads that will hunt you down.
Very interesting. So one thing I was thinking that we might do with our mecha model manufacturers is that we can individually introduce new corporations into this overall galactic setting. And you can sort of extrapolate maybe backwards what this corporation might look like or what they might be interested in or do based on this mecha model that you have in mind, right? So, you know, I said, for example, with the Mirai Corporation, their mecha are recognizable because they have very smooth curves and aerodynamic design. And Mirai as a corporation is very interested in design and aesthetics and things like that. So that kind of tells us a little bit about the corporation and their culture. And so you can work backwards or forwards, basically, right? So just because you drive an Ares Arms Megacycle 404, which is super cool already right off the bat, doesn't necessarily mean that you were a soldier for Ares or anything like that. But in this case, does it?
It does not.
Okay.
It's the thing he can afford right now.
Okay. So you don't necessarily need to tell us just yet, unless you already had in mind which corporation you were working for. Maybe we will learn some more from other people's corporations. Maybe be like, ooh, that sounds like a cool corporation. Yeah. Did you have any ideas based on the Megacycle 404, what Ares Arms might look like as a multinational intergalactic corporation?
To be perfectly honest, I stole it from Shadowrun. So
So they're Roman. No, I'm kidding.
There you go. No, I hadn't actually considered that.
It's a lot to think about just based on one name. So maybe we'll put a pin in that, right?
Okay.
Does that sound good?
Yeah.
But I'm thinking here that your specializations that came from your martial background may benefit you piloting a Megacycle 404. Can you tell us about those?
Yeah, I took a couple of specialties in high-speed driver and soldiering, just because I couldn't think of any other specializations.
I was like, soldiering, what's that? So that was just living the life.
It's not soldering, it's soldiering. I don't know. I was like, that's why I asked for examples. Like
okay.
the game is scant with examples. It literally gives 2, and neither of them felt right. And I'm not sure how broad or how narrow to go with those. So I just made stuff up, and I don't even know if it'll be useful in the game.
That's fine. Well, I mean, so effectively, we're looking at soldiering sort of being like criming as a skill, right? Doing crimes.
Really?
No, I as far as like if you had the criminal background and you took the specialization.
Okay. I was like, wait. Okay, I got you now. I was a little confused.
Yeah, so that's part of the reason why I was trying to dig a little bit more into this background and be like, what's Ishikawa all about? What did he take from his time in the military? So we definitely have this high-speed driver. So I'm imagining that's part of what your roles and responsibilities within your military were.
Yeah, I think that he was, he drove the APCs, and I thought about going pilot, but then I just went with driver because it was more directly applicable to my little crazy idea of this mega cycle, which is probably going to get trashed by everyone's giant mecha robots.
So what drove you to that? Someone who was in the military could probably remember this abbreviation for like, oh, hey, this is your role in the military, your job. It's some code, like, oh, I was a 401, which means I drove trucks.
Oh gosh, yeah, I don't know that.
David, did you serve? I have a feeling I saw you in a uniform once, but
no.
Okay.
I'm not serve. I don't know where you saw me in a uniform.
In your dreams.
MOS. Darren is the real soldier here. Oh my gosh, he served in 2 military branches. What a well-rounded individual.
Awesome.
Yes, so MOS was indeed the word I was looking for. Just the Air Force. Okay, so you were in the air-conditioned force. Anyway, cool. I don't know why I'm making digs. I didn't serve in any military, so yeah, the Air Force. That's a good one too. Anyway, your MOS involved driving fast vehicles around. So, were you drawn to that because of your personality or just your aptitude?
I think that he's received some cybernetic implants that allow him to effectively jack into particular models of military equipment, and so he's enhanced to be a great driver.
Cool. So thinking about that, we could give you a specialization of augmentation, right? Or cybernetics could be a specialization for you if you think that's something that he's familiar with. Or we could keep going and look into why he chose that. Is it because he was a daredevil, or
let's go with augmentation over high-speed driver. That's cool. That sounds much more fun.
Awesome.
And more broadly applicable. Because
Sure.
I'm a terrible cheat who wants more dice. That's really
that's what the book tells you to do. So you're just following the rules. Awesome. So that maybe gives us a bit more. So were you thinking of changing your high-speed driver to augmentation instead?
Thinking of it.
Cool.
I already have.
I see.
It's done.
Well, maybe we should work with soldiering a bit more then.
Okay.
So
Were you thinking of replacing soldiering with augmentation? That's cool too.
we can do whatever you like. I think I had more of an issue with soldiering.
Oh, okay. All right.
RSVP driver. Basically, because it sounded like you weren't super happy with that. But maybe you can clarify a bit more what you're hoping to do with that.
No, I get you, and I wasn't really lobbying for soldiering as much as I couldn't think of anything else. So yeah, just doing augmentation instead works, and we'll just keep high speed driver as is, unless people have other ideas. I'm open.
Yeah, maybe some ideas for ways we can make that more broad. So it's not just applying to vehicles, because we have a nice shiny mech for you to operate.
Mine might just be like quick reflexes. I don't know.
That could be.
So I won't make you set this in stone just yet, but I'm going to touch on that because I'm hoping that's given everybody else some ideas about what kind of specializations they might like for their background. Cool. And I apologize that these columns are a little broad on the character sheet. It's just tricky when you have basically two characters within the mech and the pilot. So I'm going to leave us there for now. I want to go over to somebody else to talk about building our mech. And hey, Darren, how about we go with you?
Sure.
Because you're giving us a warning here. You're wanting to apologize in advance. Is that right?
Yeah. That's I'm gonna intentionally bring in some body horror via mecha, so sorry.
Tell me more.
Okay, well, this company, Longinus Limited, I think develops robots and mechs in like a hyper experimental way by trying to incorporate a lot of biomimicry, and that potentially there's like probably like also biological components going on in it. So there's that.
Okay.
It's a very creepy picture, which is a little small, but you know,
I can follow the link to blow it up for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, it has teeth. Yes. So that's interesting, though, because one of the things that we're going to be exploring here, one of the themes, right, is that in this genre, like mecha are sort of an expression of our pilot's personality in some way, right? It's sort of exaggerated in different ways. And by having a mecha that actually possibly breathes or has blood or something like that is a very interesting idea. So I'm interested in that for sure. So some of the ways that we can define our mech further is by looking at their weight class. So there's 4 options available: light, standard, heavy, and assault. And you'll see each of those have a larger weight number. But as your weight goes up, your ability to carry weapons increases. And when we are engaging in combat maneuvers that are relying more on strength of arms, your mech is going to be able to contribute to those further. Conversely, we have our speed, which goes from very fast, standard to slow. Again, a heavier mech is going to be slower and is going to contribute to maneuvers that require speed more in a lesser way. So with that in mind, how do you envision this particular Longinus mecha to fit into one of those categories?
I'm thinking it's either standard or heavy, right? Because I want it to be pretty like humanoid, human-esque, and not bulky, but it's also not some spindly quick thing. So I don't know if that makes it fast or normal, but heavy seems a little too heavy. And standard seems correct.
So one difference that we have between these weight classes that's sort of cut off between standard and heavy is that a standard mech will only have one weapon, but a heavy mech will also have a holdout weapon or a backup weapon in addition to that, which may be something that's integrated into the mecha itself, right? This could be small laser turrets built into it or something like that. So do you see this mecha having any sort of inbuilt weapon system or more than one beyond the primary weapon system? If so, you may consider going with heavy or assault, but if not, we might stick with standard.
Well, let me ask you, because looking ahead about the structural components, there's a note on the torso. So what I want to ask is it okay if I don't have a weapon mounted to my arms? And it's mounted like in my body or something, or in my mech's body, not my mech.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. Then I think I like one. I like the drama of only having one weapon. So I'm okay with standard if you want to go that way.
Good deal. Yeah. So, you know, again, mecha can take many forms. Some of them might not even have arms. They might just have big missile cabinets or whatever on their shoulders and things like that. Not every mecha is as humanoid as yours, but that's cool. So we'll be thinking about that for weapon, and you're right about the structural components. Another important thing that we're going to do is pick a special system. So the rules state that you should pick 3 that this model will have to kind of flesh out the model itself, but you're only going to have access to 1 at the beginning. But in the interest of time, we don't necessarily need to define those right away for our first session. So just pick at least 1 of those that you'd like. In the future, you might earn more. So one aspect of this mech you might have. So with the special systems, as opposed to the specializations, there actually is a list of those. If there's something in particular you really want that's not included, we can kind of workshop that and figure it out. But we could also maybe reskin one that's available.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna do heavy armor. That play safe.
Good call. So to explain armor and how that works a bit further, if you ever come into a situation where I say something has happened that has damaged one of your 5 structural components, you can instead mark off one of your armors, and that doesn't happen. So it's sort of like an expendable thing in that way. And then when it comes to maintenance or repair, you can get it back. Cool. Heavy armor. And once we've all completed all of our characters, we'll probably circle back around and kind of give a total overview of these characters in particular. But I want to move on to talk about talents. And also potentially our CO. So I'm trying to remember from the chat here who all is going to be present in all 4 sessions. Darren, I think you mentioned you were. Rich will be. Louise, how about yourself? Are you going to be able to be in all 4?
I'm gonna miss the next one.
Okay. So we'll figure out if it's going to be Lieutenant Ishikawa or Darren's character, who is going to be our CO. They're going to start out at level 2, which is at this time basically going to mean that you're going to have 1 more edge. So everybody else, you're going to be level 1, but we all still have 2 talents. Let's go ahead and jump over to David and his character Nox. What 2 talents did you pick for Nox?
Let's see. Let me get back to this page. I picked Mechanic and Lucky.
Cool. So, in the interest of keeping our character sheet as compact as possible so that we can try to keep an eye on everybody's characters a little bit more easily, instead of including a cell for copying the whole description of your talent onto the page, I just put a space in the note for you to put it there. So that means if I want to go and say, what does mechanic do again? I can hover over your cell and see the description there.
Gotcha.
Do you know how to copy and paste into notes?
Yeah, where am I copying from? I just picked these based on what they sounded like they did.
Oh, okay. Well, if we look at the rules, the beta rules, it has a list of these as well as the special systems. So there is a link to the folder in the resource folder. Do you have access to that?
I have access to something. I'm looking at All Systems Nominal Beta v 2.0. B? Is that the right one?
Yes, that's where we'll be in. So we might need to, I might have gone the wrong order of character creation here, but you'll see talents on page 7.
Yeah, okay. So lucky, once per session, avoid a bad outcome. Mechanic, you count as a qualified technician for purposes of maintenance and repairs, and grant 1d or plus 1d to recovery. So that's, I'll paste those in there. So we've got them.
Cool. So touching on the way the rules work a little bit, we have this dice pool that we're going to build, and we're looking for the highest die is what we're going to consider. So a 6 is a full success. A 4 or 5 is a partial success. And if none of your dice are higher than a 3, you've got a bad outcome. So because you're lucky, if we get into a situation where you roll and your highest number is a 3 or lower, we can bop that up to a partial success. And like we mentioned with Darren's armor, there's going to be a time when we need to do some maintenance and repairs on our mecha, and part of that process is going to ask if we have technicians available to help with these repairs. So we don't necessarily need that since we have a mechanic who's also a pilot, which is going to be very helpful if we're caught away from our repair station out in the middle of combat or behind enemy lines, whatever that might be. We can look to Nox. Very cool. I want to hear a bit more about Nox, so let's keep going with her stuff here. Let's talk about weapons, because I think that's kind of like one of our last things that we need to detail here. And that's also going to be listed in the basic rules, how we do that. But essentially, you get to define what the weapon looks like, what it does, and then you're going to choose an optimal range for it, basically. So it could be a gas rifle, it could be lasers, it could be missiles, it could be all these different kinds of things. But for your mecha, how would you describe their primary weapon?
So I found this cool picture that I like. You can see it there. It's almost like an oversized exoskeleton mech that has 2 arms that are cannons, but on top of the cannons looks like something that could be used as a melee weapon. And I think that's exactly what it is. It's like a, not large caliber for a mech, but large caliber for men. Rifles with something that could be used as a melee weapon on top, but probably if Nox did have to use those as melee weapons, it would probably really damage the rifles. So it's not something she sets out to do, but it's something she has the contingency of doing.
Sure. Wow, that's interesting. So that makes me wonder what we would call the ideal range for these weapons, right? because we're choosing from, if I can find it here, melee, short, far, or extreme, which correlates to our battle map, which we'll look at later also. But certain things do require specializations with the mech as well. So for example, if you want to have an extreme range weapon, your mech is going to need to reflect that as well. Maybe they have sensor packages or something like that that help them to make those ranges. Sounds though like maybe these aren't meant to be fired at that far of a range, especially if you're in like sort of a hard suit.
Yeah, they're not extreme. That's I think that's right.
Yeah, so looking at the special systems, I have a feeling that basically we'll just use those bayonets, those space bayonets, to sort of be fictional positioning if we ever get into melee combat, because it doesn't sound like they're particularly effective at at that role, because it can damage the rifle, like you said.
Yeah, I think that's right.
But these cannons in particular, do you think that they are used short distances, like you would with a rifle on a larger mech, or are you staying kind of farther away and trying not to get squashed as a little?
Yeah, I think these are far distance things.
Cool. Yeah, because if you get too close, you might get caught in the crossfire, sort of idea, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Me and Lieutenant Ishikawa do our best to avoid getting caught underfoot.
Very good idea. Okay, now I'm going to look over your character sheet here, Louise, and make sure I'm not missing anything.
Okay.
I think the last two boxes I kind of want to touch on. Last three boxes. So, mecha-wise, I just want to touch on the stress die and the equipment section. So, the stress die is going to be equal for all mecha, and it's going to basically be whenever you. It's less testing the structural integrity, so to speak, of your mecha, and more of like the servos and the fuel, and is it getting overheated? Do we need a heat sink? Those sort of things. When that's tested, we go with the stress die. So it starts at D8, and it's sort of like a risk die that you might have seen in OSR games, where if you get a certain result, it gets lowered, and then you're going to be rolling a D6. So it's basically, I guess I would call it like ablative armor compared to like your regular armor. So that might come into play. Especially with like this combat I have planned. But anyway, equipment sort of refers to like what you have on your person. And again, this is kept very vague. You basically have everything a pilot would expect it to. You have your own holdout pistol, you have a med kit, you have emergency rations, you have a flashlight, you have a comm unit, whatever it is you need. So I'm not concerned with the minutia of what your pilot is carrying, especially because a lot of the action and combat is going to be in the mecha. So we have these checkboxes for our structural components that reflects the well-being of your mecha. But we also have these checkboxes for your pilot, which are called their scars. Okay. So these reflect both, could be physical scars as well as trauma that you have endured and sort of still carry with you. So we might do a little bit of a procedure here that Kyle's working on, sort of to get things started, where I ask questions, and each of them is going to give you a scar. We might not do that. I'm going to keep an eye on time here and make sure we're doing mostly fun stuff. So with that in mind, do you have any particular questions, Louise, about your pilot or your mecha that we did not cover with discussing the other three characters?
I think I'm good. Like, I'm still not entirely down with what I want to do. I think I'm gonna go with a really like resistant in your type brawler type of mech, since everybody seems to be shying away from combat. Somebody has to hold these people together.
Cool.
Yeah.
I like that. So I see here for like talents, you chose brawler as being one of them, right? Where yeah, you perform well within melee range and when engaging in hand-to-hand combat outside your mech as well. And I see you kind of have this super awesome bug mech here, this beetle mech. Yeah, and you're a heavy mech, which means that you may not be as fast, but you are definitely bringing the pain when you do get into range, right? Cool. So, like, is this mech's primary weapon something suited for melee range? I'm imagining as well. Then.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure it out. I'm thinking something like, I don't know, maybe some armor plates slide over his fists and then just like punches the other mech.
Yeah, straight up punch a robot. I love that. Cool. So that's definitely a good thing to think about as far as like what this weapon might look like. And then we can also, if you're still thinking about what this weapon might look like, I might also point you to the special systems as well, because some of those are directly related to your weapons. For example, if you want to have a two-handed weapon, like a really large rifle, that's actually going to be covered under special systems. So take a look at those and see if you maybe have some more ideas there.
Okay.
Cool. Rich, I'm going to wrap back around to you then and kind of check in with you in your character creation process. I see you've picked a weight class for your mega cycle. Sounds about right for it to be light.
Mhm.
When I look at this picture, I see what may or may not be a pilot sitting atop of it.
So I saw that the assumptions for structural components are kind of assuming a bipedal robo or a mecha. So I changed those, and one of the structural components is decoy pilot.
Okay.
So he's actually inside the ball itself.
Very cool.
It's not remote or anything, but yeah, he's inside. He's kind of underneath the what looks like the saddle.
Okay. So that kind of gives me some ideas too about what the scale might look like, which is what I was going to ask. You know, how big is this in relation to your body?
Ain't
Not
big.
very big.
Not very big. That thing can easily be carried by probably at least two of the other mecha in our little lance.
Luckily, though, it is big enough to mount a Gauss rifle. Is that right?
I mean, I could go with a different weapon. It's totally cool. I just the idea of him having to carry a lot of weapon in an AC-20, a whole lot of armament in an AC-20 doesn't make sense. But like a Gauss rifle kind of made sense. So I don't know.
For sure. So, like, where is that sort of mounted? Like on this kind of headpiece that we see here, is that sort of mounted onto there, so it's always staying upright?
Yeah, that's a weird little bit because
Take
it
liberty
could
with
easily
the
be not
picture.
pictured. It could be
Right.
not pictured. It's like a pop-up turret type deal that kind of comes up there. Could be. I don't know. I'm open to it. If anybody has any really inspired ideas?
Part of the reason why I ask that question is just to know which structural component, when damaged, would affect your weapons.
Yeah, and I think that would be torso. I think would be the one that affect weapons.
Cool.
Because the torso is kind of what I'm envisioning as being the saddle, I guess, for
Right.
lack of a better word.
Cool beans. I like it. And luckily, you're both a shootist and a sensor specialist, so you're going to be really great at both staying out of this sort of danger zone and sending really nice, big covering fire shots, and also helping other people to do that too.
Yeah, and I go right into the danger zone. Sorry, that's just to get the song in someone's head. That's all. I said those words for that.
Thank you very much. Okay. So throughout this process and thinking about this particular mecha model, right? Has that given you any further insight into what Ares Arms might look like as a corporate culture?
I kind of imagine Ares Arms as being the corporate culture is very shark, like we're fully transparent. It is only the best will survive. Like the bottom 10%, every performance review, the bottom 10% will go. They will be let go. And it's like a very hard charging style of management within this corporate culture. It's also super militaristic. Is that cool?
I love it. Thank you. That's just giving me notes for future campaigns that will only exist in my head and in my notebook. But yeah, because it might be interesting if we explore people from corporate or martial backgrounds, like places you may have come from. But we've established that Ishikawa is not from Ares. He just drives one of their vehicles.
Yep, they're cheap, but they're good.
Speaking of cheap and good, let's go back to Darren. I'm just
That's an insult to Darren.
Wow.
I'm just messing with you, Darren.
I don't come here to be read like this.
Let's talk a little bit more about your pilot.
Yes, please.
I see you've got a very brooding individual from this picture you've chosen.
Yeah, I don't know about it though.
We can change that.
It's simple. I think it's what I want. I think I'll be brooding. I don't know.
Well, you might just have.
I kind of want to hum Gorillaz songs when I look at that picture.
Yeah, I can see that.
I happen to like Gorillaz.
Did you have any idea about what sort of a background this person may have come from?
I've had a handful of ideas, which is part of the problem. At first, I was thinking maybe he was like a test subject, because if these are these like kind of strange, almost biological mecha, maybe there's something. Maybe they're also testing and developing people too, but I don't know. I don't want to go too Evangelion with this. I'm already like 3/4 of the way there, so just lean back. But then I was thinking maybe I like this idea of labor, and maybe he was like working and somehow ended up with this, maybe got caught up in like a heist to steal this mecha, but I don't know. This might be too big. I don't know.
Okay. Well, here's what I'll do. I'll move on to David if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
But not in an attempt to ignore you, but hopefully I'll maybe ask David some questions about Nox. Who looks like, do you maybe have more of a concrete idea about Nox, David?
Yeah, I think that
get some osmosis going here, Darren.
I think that Nox worked for or was a part of Ares Arms, where this mecha that she has came from, but she is an outcast from them for some reason or other, and has joined up with some other crew.
Very interesting. I have a few questions that I'm basically planning to ask everyone to kind of interrogate their characters further. So I'll just go ahead and start with you then. Mercenary work is a dangerous way to make a living, right? So what drew you to it?
Necessity and like the thrill of it, I think.
Yeah. Well, we've already established that Ares can be a kind of aggressive and churning as far as corporations go, but it sounds like that's right up Nox's alley. But she decided to go above and beyond and be a mercenary too. Is that right?
Yeah, I think they kicked her out for some reason. Like, I don't know what it was, like insubordination or something. But yeah, it's like you'd think she would fit right in, but turns out she's just a little too crazy.
She's too intense for the Sharks. They had to kick her out. That's pretty intense. I like that kind of story of like, you know, even these badasses couldn't handle how badass I was. So with that in mind, though, right, you could still have joined any number of militaries and sort of dedicated your service to one corporation and have a constant stream of adrenaline and battle to fuel your ambition. But you decided to turn away from the military and to join an extra military force. What was it about the military that turned you off?
Like, this is still a question for me.
Yeah.
Like, I think I don't play nice with others. Like, I want to do my own thing. I don't like people telling me what to do. And that's probably part of why, like, I didn't get along with the other sharks in the Ares Corp. Was like, I just kept wanting to do my own things, and it probably caused some trouble. And mercenary work is better suited to somebody who likes to do their own thing. Because, like, hey, if you don't fit in with one crew, you can just move on to another crew or freelance, whatever.
That's a good point. And on this mission in particular, there's going to be a lot of initiative and independence expected of you. So that could definitely be helpful here. I see with your mecha, the Killer Spectre. nice callback there. That prototype. One of your special systems that you chose was the hacking module. Semi-autonomous unit that uses weaponized artificial intelligence algorithms to subvert enemy systems. Man, Kyle, you used some long words, but it was a mouthful. So tell me a little bit more about what that looks like.
So, I mean, that goes with Nox's thing. She's into the latest and greatest tech. Hence, she's piloting a prototype that she probably stole from Ares before she left. And I think this is a new technology. Like, this could change the face of mech warfare if this kind of stuff works. But I think it's probably incredibly unreliable. You know, like, this is the kind of thing that could stop a mech in its tracks without any, like, damage to it. It's the kind of thing that, like, if it worked right, it could take over another mech. Maybe for a limited period of time, but, like, this is technology in its infancy. So probably notoriously unreliable.
Very cool. Nox is on the bleeding edge. I like it. Okay, I'm starting to get a bit clearer picture of Nox here. And I really like both the similarities that her and Ishikawa have, as well as some of the differences, especially with them piloting two mechs from the same manufacturer, the same make, which is kind of cool. But let's look at some other vectors here. Darren, are you ready for me, or should I keep going on to Louise? No pressure either way. I know I've been razzing you, but literally,
no, you're fine. Yeah, I think I'm good, and I think maybe I'm ready to talk it through, because this is now I'm like, I don't know how to, like, frame what I'm thinking. So I like this idea that, like, Ares has this corporate culture that people are, like, born into and grow up into and are a part of. So I kind of want to, like, co-op that onto Longinus. So I think that a character was, like, grew up with Longinus, and maybe I didn't want to go with that, like, test subject angle, but maybe Longinus does, like, a strenuous long-term, like, testing. It's like standardized testing in school, but what they're actually testing for is, like, proficiencies and abilities and some inherent abilities or whatever to pilot mechs. So I think maybe my person went through that, and then somehow got away with a mech because they ran away. So I just don't know if this, should I frame this like single heist as like a criminal, or are they an outcast, or were they marginalized somehow?
Well, it sounds like this was like a very singular event.
Yeah. Yeah.
One that probably didn't, that we're kind of asking here, did that shape you as you became a mercenary? And did you spend a lot of time after that living as a criminal? Did you go straight into the mercenary life? Or are you bringing to the table some experiences that you had while still a citizen of Longinus, you know, that you sort of utilize as a mercenary?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, because I like this idea that like I didn't want to be part of Longinus, so I left. So maybe it is a criminal, and maybe there is just more of a past there than I'm thinking of initially. Like it probably, like as a kid, there was a lot of acting out, and then as like a teen and a young adult, maybe that turned into like actual criminal activity, and maybe all of that whole history culminated in running off of this mech. Because I'm thinking I'm involved in mercenary work as like basically a way to cover myself and like this mech, so it's hard to find and track, so I can't get hunted down easily. Because I imagine they want the property back. So I think criminal. Now that we've talked it through, I think that makes sense.
Okay.
And I can bring all that history and a smoking habit, apparently.
Oh, you've updated your character.
Yeah, I did. This is the last one.
I like it. Well, I mean, none of these are set in stone. If we feel like some of these specializations are not doing it for us, we can change these up on the fly. So we're not worried too much about that. But thank you for giving us a little bit more background on your pilot and on Longinus. I think we're starting to crystallize a bit here. But your weapon sounds really cool.
Okay, yeah.
Can you tell us a bit more about your controlled fission burst?
Yes, so I do want it in my hands, my arms, and I want to build up to this two-handed weapon idea. So I'm thinking is that this mech can create these like short range, like and like blasts out of its hands or something. So, and to wrap that into loose sci-fi terms, I'm calling it a fission burst. Because eventually I want it to make this like localized region where it like uses both hands to make a burst.
Sure. So it's like a mecha kamehameha.
Oh yeah. I have
like
little baby kamehamehas right now, and I want to get a big one later.
All right. Well, you got to go into the time capsule or whatever. Cool. Let's hop over then to Caio. Am I saying that correctly, Louise?
Yep. It's the Brazilian name that sounds exactly like Kyle, so I'm using it to pay homage to Kyle.
Very cool. What do I want to check in with first? I think I want to ask about your background a little bit as well. I see you've chosen marginal, and just one thing I forgot to mention at the top, but I want to have be part of this landscape, right? This mercenary core that you're a part of is going to be inclusive. So within the core, I don't want anyone to have to worry about being discriminated against for any particular reason having to do with your typical list. But you can establish that elements outside of that aren't necessarily the same way. If a certain corporation's military isn't that way, or if the galaxy at large behaves a different way. But I do want this core to be inclusive. So you chose for Caio the marginal background. And what does that mean for him?
I think it means he grew up on like the fringes of society, like a community of people who are not, like they mostly do odd jobs for the big companies, but they don't live in any of the company's designated spaces. So they're kind of left their own because it's interesting for the companies to have cheap labor, so they don't interfere with their internal politics. But they also don't get a lot of the benefits of living under one company. So it's sort of I'm basically emulating off of that name. an isolated society that serves itself and operates inside a larger, more organized society, but doesn't take advantage of all the benefits inside it and gets like taken advantage of for cheap labor.
That definitely makes sense with some of the things that Rich established about with Ishikawa. You know, there's some people are born with this debt, but your background, the people that you were with, didn't have any ties to any one corporation. They're sort of working freelance, and that's almost, it sounds like, has formed its own like caste within the galaxy, right?
Uh-huh.
Is there like a term that most people use to refer to that class of people?
That's a good question. I think maybe something like scrappers, because they're always looking for scrap metal, and they're also seen as scrappy because they get by on very little.
I like that. Cool. So that could be used both as a compliment or as criticism. Interesting.
Yeah, it's something like, I can say it, but you can't.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I won't riff off of that any further. But I see you've chosen for one of your specializations to be diversion, and is that related to how you one of the ways that you got by in this society was to create diversions so that people could escape, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's something like that. Like, I think they have very little resources to build mechas. So this mecha that I'm piloting is one of the few ones that they managed to put out there. And so I'm responsible with it, and I use it to, like, in the most efficient way possible, which usually means taking on the mechas and letting people do, like, groundwork behind me while I'm drawing their attention.
Very cool. Did you have an idea for your second specialization, or do you maybe want to pull the table and get some ideas?
Yeah, I'm looking for something related to protecting others, but I think that version covers that, or maybe like getting into close combat or anything that has to do with like working the system, subverting security systems, stuff like that.
Anybody have any ideas for that? I'm taking a note here. This is a process, but what were you saying, David?
What's the saboteur?
Oh yeah, so someone who's good at setting up sabotage or sneaking in and setting things up to go wrong for somebody. Is that something you would?
I think you that.
Very cool. All right, so let's talk a little bit more. So I want to ask here about your connected talent. So when it comes time to try to gather resources, you know, if you're trying to, refuel your ammo or whatever it might be, that's resources you need, you're particularly adept at that. Where does that come from?
I think he's got always an ear to the ground, and he's in touch with people in a way that most aren't. Like, he pays attention to the one guy that brings the crates in instead of dealing with the shop owner and stuff like that. So he can usually get good deals and such.
Right. You're like, no, I don't want to talk with you. I want to talk with her. And you see like the old grandma with the tea, and it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Okay. Well, let's dig into your mech a little bit. The B Zorro, made by the Gunby Collective.
Yeah. So the name is a pun on the word beetle in Portuguese. And
cool.
And the collective, I'm imagining basically like just a group of scientists working together with spare parts to make mechas for the scrappers to use.
Right. So this is almost its own, like a startup. It sounds like some kind of cool, like, what's the term? Not collective, but like a commune sort of thing that started up here. I like that. Cool. So we're seeing this Bizarro is something that's sort of made with the small parts from several other models of mech. Is that right? It's sort of cobbled together.
Yeah, like if you lift the armor plating and look inside, it's all cobbled together. They just put a nice finish on it, so it looks like one thing.
Well, I hope that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts in this case, for sure. All right, and you've named your weapon the Carapace Gauntlet.
Oh yeah.
Now, being a heavy class mecha, you have the option of having a holdout weapon as well, sort of a backup weapon that you can use in addition. And I have to double check to make sure if it already has some like tags or whatever.
Okay.
Okay. Well, maybe. All it says in the rules is that if you run out of ammo, you can use a holdout weapon, but you do so at -1 range at a disadvantage. So, since your primary weapon is done in melee, there is no closer range than that.
Should I take it?
But I also don't want you to be rolling your punching at disadvantage either. So, tricky question. Let's not worry about giving the holdout weapon any disadvantages. Let's just say this is what you also have available at your disposal. I kind of want to reflect the fact that you took a heavier mech, which has its drawbacks. So I don't want you to lose out on that. What do you think your backup weapon would be?
Hard to downgrade from just a fist.
Well, I don't know. If you have a shining finger, that might be, kind of all you need. But
I like David's suggestion. I think it's something like I overcharge the bot and send out a laser from my chest.
okay, very cool. I like that. Your chest opens up, you burn them up with your core. Cool. All right. Well, looking at these characters, I think that they're mostly fleshed out. And I want to get into some gameplay, but we've also been working on this for a good period of time, so I want people to have a break. Yeah, you know what? Let's just come back in 5 minutes so we can get refreshed before we start doing stuff, and then we'll do some scenes that are sort of zoomed out, and then we'll start slowly zooming in and hopefully getting in some action this last hour. So let's come back at around 38. Sound good?
I still have no idea what I'm doing. There's just so many options.
Too many options, do you think?
No, it's just I'm so ecstatic to play a mecha game.
Well, I hope we have fun.
I'm sure we will. It's a good crew.
Indeed. Did you think of a name for your pilot yet?
No, but I can come up with a name pretty quickly. That one I'm
Anyways,
confident in.
I just wanted to be able to refer to them by name.
That's okay. Let me pull up something. I think I will be.
I did not prepare a good list of names anyway myself, so and we need to find out who is the CO.
It's
Sounds
probably
like it's probably gonna be Rich, but
yeah. No, that he's already a lieutenant, so
yeah.
I think Rich makes sense. If they're supposed to be responsible, I think Rich's character makes sense.
I also need to make sure I give someone that debrief role.
Okay, we're going with Haran. That'll be my character's name.
Trying to decide what I'm going to run for Star Wars Saturdays in January, and I really want to run Primetime Adventures. I've had the worst time making that work with Gauntlet.
You know, I was gonna ask Rich if you're planning on still doing Star Wars Saturdays next year, or if you're gonna do a whole new theme or what.
I think I am. I'm having too much fun. We're in Return of the Jedi timeline, so maybe 2019 will be the last of the we'll get through the trilogies, but I think I am, yeah. Pretty sure, like 99% sure.
Yeah, I have to put up an event for January 2, and I need to do it probably tonight to get my efficient time in. So, yeah. Alrighty then. All systems nominal. All the systems are looking good. Everybody's feeling good after the break. All right. Let's talk a little bit about your situation coming in. So, one thing we're going to need to determine here is the name of your mercenary corps. This force here is not representative of the entire corps, and in fact, there are probably one or two or more pilots in this group, which is going to help explain when new people come in. There's just that person with us today. But this squad, so to speak, you still work for a larger mercenary corps. So we're going to think of a name for them at some point so that we know the cool logo that we all have emblazoned on our mecha. But you have been contracted by the Marai Symposium, which is one of these large intergalactic corporations, right? And one of the elements of the science of this setting, right, is that faster than light travel is capable, but it's very expensive. So it's something that's really only more in the hands of these corporations, right? They're the ones who are able to ship you across the galaxy. So part of your contract is that you are getting dropped off on this planet. So the downside to that is that you're kind of stranded here until they come back to pick you up, right? Now, if this were a big campaign and we were watching, the sort of growth of your mercenary corps over multiple missions and engagements and contracts, and you would gather money as a company and you would get your own faster than light ship, that'd be cool. But for these circumstances, you're being dropped off. So I'm imagining there's this sort of routine cargo cycle that's done by these corporations, right? Where every certain amount of time, yes, they're in the soccer mom drops you off along with supplies for the planet and things like that. So you're just kind of dumped in with the cargo, and you are all anchored in a hangar within your MOC, which stands for Mobile Operations Center. So this is like a large but not very pretty mobile base. So it's sort of something that maybe has like wheels. I'm talking like a humongous semi that has also like cabins for the pilots, hangar bays for the mecha. It has maintenance repair bays. It has conference room. It has weapon storage, basically anything you could want all on one giant tractor trailer, so to speak. So you're basically getting dropped in with the rest of this stuff onto this planet. And you're going to meet up with your liaison to deal with this contract. Now, the contract you've been given is pretty vague. Basically, you're being hired to increase revenue. So when the ship comes back to pick you up, they're going to calculate how much additional projected revenue that your actions have enabled this company to earn, and that's going to be part of your bonus, so to speak. That makes sense. So at the time, you're kind of going in blind, right? And Luis Man says, let's not try to step on civilians. Your reputation as a mercenary corps is also kind of on the line here. So doing well here is also going to mean that you look good for the mercenary corps. Maybe you get a little Christmas bonus from your superiors. But one of you in this squad is going to be the commanding officer. So this is someone you're going to be meeting with Administrator Walker. She's going to be telling you what needs to be done, and you're going to be the person who figures out exactly what military engagements or mercenary activity needs to be done to help her achieve that goal. Right? So going in kind of blind, you're going to get your orders from Walker. So what I would kind of like to do here is kind of overlay these two scenes happening at once, right? Where we see your mecha rolling in on this situation, but then we're sort of also looking at the commanding officer meeting with Walker and telling you what's going on. Think we can manage that? We'll figure it out. It might be terrible. We have 3 more sessions to polish it. So that kind of begs the question then, who is the commanding officer? I have an inclination, but I don't want to push it on the most obvious candidate without their player's consent. And Rich, I see you've unmuted yourself.
I mean, I could do it. Weird biomech guy, maybe he could do it. I don't think Nox is a leader since she's terrible at taking orders.
Yeah, I'm not a leader, and I'm only here for half the time, so I'd duck out on you guys.
Neither of those should be. And I think, the marginalized person being the leader would be interesting for Kyle. But yeah, I think it's either me or Darren. Darren, do you want it?
I think not. But if you really don't want it, I don't really mind.
You don't want to be like our super creepy leader who's like super like untalkative and vague.
Well, I don't know if I'm talkative and vague. It's just his mech that's creepy, probably.
Sure. Yeah, that's exactly how it works in anime. Creepy mechs by the not creepy pilot every time.
Good point.
Sure. I guess it'll be Ishikawa. And
Very
yes,
cool.
I stole that from Ghost in the Shell, and I'm not even ashamed.
You shouldn't be.
It's even the same pick. I don't care. Somehow Ishikawa has been cloned and thrown forward hundreds of years. And here he is. It's a mecha pilot.
Okay.
Ishikawa.
So, you are starting off as the pro with 2 experience.
I'll take it.
And that's going to also give you 2 edge, which is useful in certain roles.
2 edge. Okay, you're adjusting that. Awesome.
Yep,
Okay.
got it covered for you. So, let's talk a little bit about this planet you're landing on. We kind of covered this a little bit with the mission briefing, but just to get everybody fresh in their minds, you're landing on Eratan 4. This is a small but mineral-rich planet in an otherwise unremarkable and remote system. So, both the Marai Symposium and the Apex Conglomerate, which I have little bios on too if you're interested further, have claims on the various deposits on the surface. So most of the laborers on this planet are freelance inhabitants, and they're paid in corp script, which is basically like you can spend this money at our store. It's store credit, so to speak, right? So I'm thinking, though, with some of these details that we've learned from Kyle, that this is probably also like somewhat of a scrapper kind of community. I'm thinking that the corporate presence here isn't necessarily too strong because it's remote. You know, it's maybe a somewhat more minor investment that they have. So the people that are here are probably less steeped in the corporate culture, less loyal, but they're still getting paid. And especially because we have these 2 corporations who seem to kind of be in competition here, nobody's necessarily aligned to one or the other. Every day they go to work and paychecks come in with different type, but it's the same money, you know. And I'm sure that, you know, that in the local market stalls, we're seeing people who are trading in different corp scripts and figuring things out as they go. So the specific drop point you're coming to is called Extraction Point Lambda. So this is one of the largest deposits and most active, thriving mining communities on the planet. It's also one of the most hotly contested between the 2 corporations. So there's a lot of competition going on here. A lot of back and forth, a lot of fighting, things like that. So part of the reason why is because it's particularly rich in dilithium, which is just some mineral I stole from Star Trek, which is a compound.
It's kind of our unobtainium.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Now, a city has grown around the outskirts of the mines, sort of tenaciously. And again, most citizens don't care who they're actually working for so long as they're paid. So that's kind of the information that's been given to you through your briefing, right? So I'm imagining on screen, we're seeing like this like big tractor trailer, so to speak, that's sort of like anchored by a aircraft being lowered kind of onto the ground here. And it's very dusty. Imagining sort of like a tan gray colored dust, sort of very omnipresent. Lots of the architecture looks maybe cobbled together, maybe weather worn, wind blown, things like that. Almost kind of Wild West out here, right? And so we're sort of flashing forward to your squad walking in formation near one of these mining machines. And I'm imagining that they're these like big, tall steel towers with like a rod in the middle that's constantly basically pumping in and out, trying to drive into the ground. So as the four of you are sort of walking in formation, there's this constant rhythmic sound of like goonch, 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 goonch. But then we're sort of like, I don't really know what cinematic technique they're using here to accomplish this, but we're kind of cross-cutting with this flashback of Ishikawa meeting with Administrator Walker and speaking with her. Right? So I'm adding a third layer here because part of the way that we're going to structure this scene is by following along with the engagement roll. Yes. So when the unit is about to start a mission or enter into a combat, we use the engagement roll to determine their starting position. And we're going to make a dice pool according to the following questions, and then the fiction will follow from the result. So basically, we're going to be exploring these questions through your interview with Administrator Walker. Right. And then by the time we've done that, we'll be hopefully getting ready to be in the thick of the shit, if that makes sense. Yeah, so we're walking through these mines here, and I just lost my place on this PDF with the engagement roll. I want to ask. So, Administrator Walker is a woman of African heritage. Of course, thousands of years in the future. Hard to say how that's changed, but she has dark skin, dark hair. She's wearing a pretty nice white dress that has very like sharp angles to it. I think it's something that sort of sticks out as you go through this sort of dusty, exterior to her headquarters, right? Her office in particular stands out from the dust as something that's well cleaned and well designed, and also sort of has like a professional aesthetic to it, right? I should probably ask like a paint the scene question here. Yeah, so like, what's something else you see in her office that like really distinguishes her from her surroundings, makes her seem out of place?
She has the standard dull gray metal desk, and behind her, off kind of underneath the cabinet, is a little like video frame of a child that's in motion. It's like it's a video capture, it's not a still picture. Child, also dark skinned. He's maybe 4, and he's running near a beach, and there's a weird dog hybrid creature that's kind of running alongside him.
Very cool. I think that you've brought one person along with you to sort of maybe this is someone that you're training to rise in the ranks and sort of take on this role in the future within the Corps. Who do you think you brought along with you for this meeting?
So this is an NPC? I'm just
What are the other pilots?
Okay, cool. Just checking. Well, it's gotta be have to.
Yeah, me. I have a cigarette always.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
If you want to flash back to you standing in the hallway and me taking that out of your mouth or asking you to remove it, that's cool, but you do not have a cigarette in this fucking office.
I like
There's
that
no
flashback too. I like maybe you like fucking ripped it out of my mouth too.
Yeah, just like drop it, step on it. You can get another one with our pay.
You gotta fuck you, Ishikawa.
So, Hafta, what sticks out to you in this office? It sort of showcases Walker's ambition. It lets you know that she's very ambitious.
Interesting. Man. Well, aside from this, I was thinking, I bet she has rugs, which is a pain probably, because she probably has to get them cleaned all the time. But what shows off her ambition? How do you want to visualize like this? I think that she... I think that she's got a massive window at the back that overlooks this whole operation, right? Some classic thing, you see the things going on outside, but it's like a good window, so it's like properly soundproofed. But I think maybe as we walk in, we see her looking out the window. But what she's actually doing, oh, that's a good like visual, but what she's actually doing is that there's like part of the window can like open, right? I don't know, it's just, you know, future glass, just a square of it can open. And there's like a drone, and she's doing something with that drone. And when we walk in, she notices us, she like sends it away, and like the window closes. And she's probably just doing like this extra step, this extra work of like spying or whatever to get ahead.
I like that. So she turns to you. And I think it's clear at first glance which person is in charge here, according to your posture. She's kind of used to sort of figuring that out. Oh, good. The mercenaries are here. I bet you're wondering what it is you're tasked to do.
Not on a social call, administrator.
Very
Definitely not on a social call.
Well, I'm sure, as you've deduced, there's a reason why we have called for mercenaries, as opposed to relying on our own private security force. And that's because they've all gone missing. Now, and she kind of like sighs and looks off over her operation, right? The Morai Symposium has not decided that it is necessary to have a large force of arms on this small operation, and she's her voice is sort of like dripping with like uh, what's the word? Derision, I guess. You can tell that she's like not very happy with where she's been placed. So they've decided that perhaps if we get some mercenaries, we can kind of recoup our costs and determine what exactly happened. The first thing I want you all to do is determine the cause of the disappearance of our military force. And if in doing so, you can also discourage any further attempts at sabotage, that would be greatly appreciated. And she kind of pulls up on like her holo projector, this like satellite map, right? And it kind of blinks, right? And shows the mine is where they were last at, right? And of course, we kind of cut back to everyone walking through that location. So pausing the scene with Administrator Walker, I want to check in with, I believe it would be Kyo, who's going to be walking point in this formation. So the person who gets into close range. Knowing that you're looking in a place where a previous military force disappeared, how are you feeling?
I would say sad. I think Kyle is a real softie, so if he thinks that people might be dead, he's gonna feel bad about it. So where exactly are we? Like, what do I see right now?
So I'm imagining out here, there's a path that's like sort of been paved, but also has been neglected. So it's sort of lots of potholes and things like that, and lots of sand covering over the ground. And you're just sort of flanked by these different towers with these mining rods. And I don't think that they're necessarily like evenly spaced. They're kind of just positioned over particularly rich parts of these ore veins. It's almost like walking through a thin forest, so to speak.
Okay.
These towers are probably like 2 to 3 times taller than your mechs.
Oh, okay. And David's question in chat: are we in mech right now? Am I in the mech?
Yeah. So this is cutting back to you on the mission, so to speak, heading towards this location.
Oh, okay. I'll get it. Okay, so first of all, I'm feeling nervous about this noise around us and like fearful for what might have happened to these people, because I know that they were probably just in it for the money and now they might lose their lives, and some company just cares about the bottom line. And yeah, I'm looking around. I want to see if I can pick up any trails or something. Maybe if there was a fight.
I want to make that a roll. No, because that'd be a cool climactic cut. So you're in the front. So you're going to be the person who sees this first. But within your sensor range, maybe we see like on the camera, like your HUD or whatever, and it kind of zooms in. And there's this mecha arm that's like been ripped from its casing, and we see like the wires like coming out of it, and it's just sort of laying in the middle of the road, right? Just sort of limply. But then we cut back to in the office with Walker. And our first question is the team well supplied? If so, you're going to get +1D. How do you ensure that the team is well supplied here? Ishikawa.
Administrator Walker, if you want us to pull some kind of recon op as well as defense, there's quite a bit of supplies that we will need. There's really two sets of lists of requirements that we'll need in standard protocol. I'm sure you understand.
Standard as it may be, I'm interested in keeping our budget on a razor's edge. As sure as you understand, our profit margins here are very important for us. I can't be just providing all the sparkling water you need. Sure, I'll need to monitor this myself.
I understand that concern, Administrator Walker. However, if there are aspects of the supply list that are unused, I'd be glad to return them. I just need to make sure that my team can be successful for your benefit and our own.
Well, I'm sure I can do my best to try to provide what's asked for on this list, but you have to understand that supplies are limited all the way out here on Aratan 4. I might not have everything you need, but perhaps if you tell me what's a top priority, I can make sure that you have that. For this mission, going out and investigating this disappearance, what on this list would you prefer to have?
Glance over at Hafta, who I know is extremely good at adapting and has a lightning calculator in his head, and I'll say prioritize those two lists into one for Administrator Walker.
Administrator, it's really simple. You see, and I'll prioritize it. Is there an actual list? Hold on, am I?
No, there is not.
Okay, good. I was like, how far do we need to go? Yeah, Hafta just says Administrator. It's really very simple. He like uncrosses his arms and will like languidly walk up to her desk. Maybe there's like a tablet or like an e-ink sheet, whatever future we're in, and you just see it's like whatever touch interface. There's just shit flying all over it. As Hafta's like, we really could use this, but if we can't have that, then we need this one, and this is really like a priority one. But if you can get more of this, then we can use less of that. Just like really over the top explanations that ends up in like 3 changes or something.
I like that, the sort of Longinus cultivated human calculator. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to say we're not going to take that to a roll in the interest of time. That's cool fictional justification. So that's going to mean your team is well supplied. You're going to get plus 1d to this engagement roll, and I believe you start with 1 for free as well. So I'll kind of be tracking this. And at any time, if there's a cool piece of tech or equipment that you think would help you fictionally, tell me what it is, and we can throw in a die to just be an additional advantage for having that, right? So cutting back now to Nox, I have a feeling that you are at the back of this formation because you're the sort of extreme range specialist, right? So you are, wait, or did I get that wrong? Oh, that's actually Ishikawa.
Yeah, I'm like far range, but not extreme range.
Well, I still want to cut to you anyway. Where are you at in this formation then, do you think?
I do think that, like, as far as like maneuvering information goes, like me and Ishikawa are probably like a long ways back observing. I think that's the design goal of the Ares type mechs. Like, you hang back, you lay low. It's really hard to spot you because you're small, and then you can like gain advantage with that.
Yeah.
So we're probably trying to observe from a distance.
So you're not able to get any information from Ishikawa's face, partly because he's inside a ball. But you're a little bit more exposed in a way. Is your head beneath a canopy, or do you have like a helmet on, or do you have, what does this look like for you physically, this hard suit?
Yeah, there's a canopy. It's space grade. Like all kinds of information is projected onto the glass for, you know, all your instruments and everything that you would need. But there's like more below that, and like the controls are below that. I think like I've just got it like rocking in here. Like I'm like listening to music. Like this is kind of like grunt work. Like this is the best job we could get, and we're gonna have to sit here for like days at a time waiting for transport to come back. Ugh.
So your displeasure is slowly starting to be replaced by this low-level anxiety that you can't necessarily explain. You feel like you're seeing things out of the corner of your eye. You maybe feel the hair on the back of your neck kind of like bristling up against the back of the cockpit, right? There's something going on here. How does Nox cope with that sort of bad feeling? Is that something that she communicates? She keeps it to herself, try to remain stoic? What does she do?
Yeah, I think just turns up the volume. That's how she copes with anxiety.
What are you listening to?
Trying to drown it out. I don't know, like whatever loud head banging music is happening in thousands of years in the future. So or if there's not any, whatever's the current head banging music, I guess.
So your rock and roll sound is sort of interestingly happens to be in time with these mining machines. So we're hearing like gunch, 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 and it's all sort of synced up. But you're trying to drown that out.
Yeah, I think it's the thumping that's like giving me the anxiety, and I'm trying to overcompensate it with music.
Maybe it's like even discordant a little bit. You know, it's messing up your rhythm here. I like that. So we cut back to the interview. Does the team have reliable and relevant intelligence? So, Hafta, you're kind of at a closer position here with this desk, right? And I think you might be able to see some documents or things like that. How forthcoming are you with your information gathering?
Oh. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm very forthcoming. I think if there's like these splayed out documents, I'm gonna just like lean over the table and try to read them. Like maybe there's like, I'll try to put out my finger and like, or my hand and like twist some of the papers around so they're just facing me. Maybe it's even like, it might even be like kind of like challenging, something like, oh, administrator, are you telling us everything we need to know?
So, yeah, I think that she doesn't necessarily respond to that too graciously. Because we're looking at like e-documents here, right? She sort of like does a hand gesture, and like these papers that you were manipulating with your fingers like kind of fly away. She's like, you are here for one reason, and that is to follow my orders, my information, and to earn me money.
Oh, see, I thought I was here to get paid and get out of this alive. Is that not what we're here for, Ishikawa?
I mean, that's yeah, at the core of it. But let's get back to the talking about our intelligence here. You're asking us to try to find out how all of your security forces disappeared, and you know nothing. You don't have any SATCOM intel. You can't have. No, I see the organization that you set up here. And I find it hard to believe that you don't know anything. So we're here to do your dirty work. show us a little bit of what we need to do to be successful. Otherwise, you're going to have to go find another merc company after we get spaced. And that's going to ruin your bottom line.
I'll tell you what I've learned. I've learned that in this life, you have to be looking out for number one. And if you truly are here to do my dirty work, then I'll tell you what I know. But if you have some sort of moral hang-up that's going to keep you from completing this mission, I'd rather leave you in the dark. What will help you sleep at night?
Getting paid.
Yep.
Getting paid. So we cut back to the formation here. And my question is, Ishikawa, how much do you inform the squad and how much do you hold back? As a leader, are you someone who only hands out relevant information?
I feel like I handpicked this team, and I know that they're a little rough around the edges. And I also understand that if I were to withhold information from them, it could be very detrimental to the level of trust that we have. Also, I mostly mock our employers with the bullshit that they throw at us. So, I don't sugarcoat it.
Well, Kaio?
To be clear, I mock our employers in private to them,
Right.
not to our employers' faces.
Yeah.
It's professionalism. Okay,
Take a note,
professionalism.
Sorry.
So, Kaio, we're cutting to you now within your cockpit, right? And when we see this on screen, this is almost like getting a look into your thoughts in your mind, right? How are you feeling about the fact that Ishikawa has related to you with this intel that it's not the Apex conglomerate who is suspected of causing the disappearance of this military force, but a rebel faction amongst the scrappers? That's kind of who you believe you're hunting down. How are you feeling about that?
Wait, was that for me? I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Sorry. So this is the
Sure.
information that Ishikawa has chosen to share with all of you. He's become forthcoming, knowing that might be a sensitive spot for you. But you're on the mission. How are you dealing with that?
Okay, not great. Kyle is very sensitive.
And I'll remind us all what our primary and secondary objectives are. It's not necessarily kill these rebels.
Okay.
It's determine the cause of the disappearance is your primary. And secondary is to discourage future sabotage attempts. But you're on point. You're sort of going to be the first responder here. What's going through your head?
I think I'm on the more idealistic side of not conforming to corporations, so I'm not entirely on board with actively sabotaging them and bringing them to the ground. So I think I feel nervous, but I also feel hopeful that I can talk people into a more reasonable approach to the oppression of our anarcho-capitalist society.
Okay. So that's kind of I'm imagining it's sort of like when you're in a shower before a job interview and you're kind of like talking this out. So like, what would you say to these rebels if you were to meet them?
I would say that they would have to get in touch. Like the best way to stand up to the corporations is get in touch with the people, because they have to realize that they're the cogs that move the system. If they all get together and do things together, they don't have to resort to violence to get things done, which is of course fake because you do, because their corporations are way more powerful. But Kyle was raised in a society where that works, so he would go with a very goody two shoes approach.
Well, we'll see how that works out for him.
Yeah.
Coming back to the office. The next question is the team engaging a strongly held enemy position? So I think that the information that Walker has on the opposition is a little blurry. So after she shares with you who's suspected of these crimes, she speaks to you again. I have not yet decided to cooperate with our competitor to gather further information. It's possible that they've been affected by this force as well. But I'd rather not play my hand too quickly. Let them know that we are currently in a moment of weakness. As a result, I'm afraid that I have limited information for you regarding the situation you may or may not be walking into. Are you prepared to deal with that?
Yeah, I am.
Oh, that's simple, huh?
Not the first time we've walked into a situation not knowing everything.
Good to hear. So, looking at these questions, is the team engaging a strongly held enemy position? I'm going to say yes, because they did manage to take out a previous military trained squad. And do the team's mecha have a significant speed advantage over the enemy? Looking at your numbers here, you do have two light mechs. You have two very fast mechs who are adaptable and light on their feet. So I would say in this instance, yes. So I'm going to go ahead and give you another die there. Let's cut back to the formation with Ishikawa laying out this approach and this battle plan. So this is where I'm asking a bit more from you, Rich, as a player, stepping up as the CO, laying out this battle plan.
I don't understand. Like, so there's some guy, the security force is gone. Kind of figure out where they are and protect us. Like that's what's been requested. So is that right? Like, do I have an understanding of what the directives are?
Yeah. So it's kind of a shitty situation that she stuck you in, right? Where she doesn't have a lot of information, but she wants you to go figure this out. And there's probably going to be some opposition, and she wants you to discourage this from happening further. So that might be her way of saying eliminate them. That might be her way of saying whatever. But basically, she doesn't want this happening again because that's going to cut into their revenue. So now, as the CEO, you kind of interpret that as how do we make a military, a tactical battle plan, so to speak, to achieve that goal. Which is slightly different from if we were playing in a different setting where we were in war and you got your orders kind of handed down to you, so it's a bit trickier. And I don't mind if you workshop a bit with the other players too, but I'll be looking to you to kind of say what goes on. Did you have an idea there, David?
Well, yeah, I mean, it probably really depends on like this is a hugely factual question. Like, what's our topography? Like, can we set up different things, or do we all just like walk in, or what kind of advantage could we even try and make? Like, terrain's a huge part of battlefield decisions, but I know that we have like this landscape of large pumps, but is it like just flat land, or is there high ground to be obtained, or
Great question. Let's turn to the battle map. So if you look in the resource folder, which is not in the beta playtest rules, but in the parent folder with our character sheet and things like that, you'll see a Google drawing that says battle map, I believe. Yep.
Okay.
So let me break this down a little bit for you. So the battle map is sort of Kyle's compromise between full gridded out mechanized miniature combat and full-on theater of the mind. So there's 4 ranges or positions that we're sort of keeping in mind here, which is melee, short, far, and extreme. And then I've got these little green boxes down here where I'm going to kind of try to describe a little bit more about what each of these ranges looks like. So I think that these towers are interspersed enough and large enough that you could kind of hide behind and engage with like small arms and sort of, duck behind and shoot. So I'm going to put those in the short range, right? So we have these mining towers. Gunch. Any more information that we need there with what the short range looks like?
So you're saying from tower to tower is short range?
Yeah, so basically it's tricky because it's not necessarily lateral, it's also kind of radial, right? So if you're planning on engaging in short range combat, if you're trying to set yourself up with weapons that are optimally used in short range, you're going to be utilizing these towers. So melee range, up close and personal, I'm thinking that is these paved roads. It's sort of a no man's land, where if you're getting up close and punching people, it could be dangerous because there's all these towers that other people can use for cover, right? It can maybe shoot you up before you get to them. So in the melee range, I'm going to say dilapidated pavement. So let's talk a little bit more then about far and extreme. So I'm thinking extreme range. This is like almost like artillery range sort of thing, I'm thinking, right? Where you're probably at a distance or have enough cover that people are going to have trouble getting at you with laser rifles and things like that, right? So I'm thinking of this mining planet and these mines, right? And what this area might look like. And this is kind of also where Ishikawa might have posted himself up, as far as his formation goes. I'd like to get some more altitude here. So maybe we have like sort of surrounding this mining operation are some like cliffs, right? Some sort of like blasted by dynamite kind of cliffs, that have been like carved out of the landscape here to get access to these surface deposits. So that's going to be extreme range. So if you are engaging these mecha from the extreme range, you're going to be up on these cliffs. So we'll say blasted cliffs. So far, this is going to be rifles with scopes and things like that, right? Looking at our characters, I'm wondering who is specialized in farther weapons.
I believe mine are far.
Yeah. So thinking about this environment, what sort of, how would you be, what would be the ideal terrain for you in this situation?
Well, all right. I mean, we don't have a map. We have this idea of things that are happening here. We've got this cliff. We've got all these pump things in the middle. I think like probably being on top of one of these superstructures and firing down. Like there's obviously going to like be periodically like other pumps in the way, but like I could fire down long distances from them, but my rifle's not powerful enough to shoot from the cliff edge. I have to be on top of one of these pump things.
Yeah, and maybe they're like sort of these like almost like helipad shaped structures on top of each of these mining structures, right? So you have sort of this like umbrella that you could stand on and lean over. And maybe there's like a grate so you can kind of see through it. And if you can get up and you can almost lily pad hop between those things if you had enough propulsion, right?
Yeah, I've got a jump pad. I don't know if that's enough, but
yeah, we'll say
maybe.
For the sake it is. Cool. So I will call those upper mining platforms. Okay. So with this sort of terrain in mind, and this sort of battlefield at your disposal here, Ishikawa, how do you think you would have leveraged that for this battle plan? How are you trying to, what are your personal goals?
I think the personal goals would be to try to draw out any invading force, utilizing our speed to our advantage, try to maybe even give the appearance that we are not entirely sure this is the battleground, and the speedier of the two of us can just kind of blaze through, force them to react, and that's when we by forcing them to commit, moving past them, we can bring in our tighter forces to bear and then move on and past and get at range.
Yeah, so it doesn't sound like this is an overly complex plan.
We'll probably never have an overly complex plan with me as a CO. That's the most complex thing I've said all day, maybe the whole weekend.
Well, luckily that is in your favor because you will not lose a die for that. And then finally, is the broader operational situation in the team's favor? I think starting things off right now, jumping right into it, getting your feet wet, not having a good handle on exactly what's going on, the operational situation is not in your favor. Maybe in future missions, while you're still here, you might have a chance to change that. For now, you're not going to get bonus. So when I calculate up these questions, starting with 1 die for free, we add 2 more, 3 more. Let's subtract 1. So 1, 2, 3. Okay. So we have 3 die that we're rolling to determine our initial position. So basically, we're sort of man, I'm not good with vocabulary today. We're going to roll, and we're going to use that to determine how good or bad of a situation we're walking into. That makes
Kyle,
sense?
Kyle, do it. Roll 3d6 for us.
Give it to us, Kyle.
No pressure. One, 2, and 6.
Okay, nice. You got a 6. So when it comes to combat, this is formatted kind of weird. You got a success from having 1 6. So that means that your initial position is 6. Okay, let's talk a little bit about that. Let me add a little text box here. 6. So, ways that your position is affected. Number 1, it determines what maneuvers that you can do. So basically, the way that combat unfolds, there's only 2 rounds of combat, right? It's like One Night Ultimate Werewolf, okay? At the end of that second round of combat, we determine how this fight went. You could choose from these different maneuvers here to determine the sort of things that you might do in this fight. And if at any point you get to, I believe it's position 10. Right. If one side is reduced to 0 position, you succeed. So you have yourself actually set up in a pretty good situation. The position is sort of on a scale from 1 to 10 or 0 to 10. So if you are at position 6, that means that the opposition is going to be at position 4. And if through combat you're able to reduce their position to 0, you succeed. Or it's sort of, you look at those numbers to determine how well you did after 2 rounds. But we are at 2 hours and 40 minutes. And combat could take a little bit longer than that. And I want to have some time to debrief. So I want to leave our position at 6 here and start off with our first maneuver and the first enemy sighting when we come back next week. Everybody cool with that? Cool. I'm glad we were able to get through this much. I know there was a lot of talking and not a lot of playing, but I'm glad that we were able to get a somewhat grounded situation here. But before I get into further debrief talk, because I'm so used to that, who is willing to step up to be our debrief manager for tonight's session?
I have no problem doing that. If someone really wants to do it, though, I will not step in their way.
I'll give it to you, David. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to take a 5 to 10 minute break here. And you send us a link to Discord on our Hangouts group chat. And if anyone wants to come back to that, you can.
Cool. Then, yeah, I'll pull up a Discord.
Alrighty. Well, thank you all for watching. All 3 or possibly even 4 of you. Have a nice night.